Over the last few years, I've become increasingly alarmed at how China is treated in the face of its human rights abuses. Over the past few years, it's begun a slow takeover of Hong Kong, and I think most notably its treatment of the Uyghur population in mainland China, where they have built concentration camps where they're effectively trying to erase the Uyghur population from their society, and they're doing it through forced re-education. We could call it propaganda, rape, murder, and basically a general suppression of the population in general. It's kind of a well-known secret, but the depths of the program and what the Chinese are doing is still yet to be fully revealed. But it's plainly obvious that they are doing a great deal of evil over there. I ran across an article on NPR where they say that the Chinese treatment of the Uyghurs has reached the UN's definition of genocide, and I'll link all of the sources below. That all brings me to the reason I'm making this video, and that is because China seems to be impervious to even open criticism from our political leadership. Let's say the president in general. Trump was slow to criticize the Chinese treatment of the Uyghurs, and just recently President Biden had a town hall at CNN, and when he was asked directly about how the Chinese are treating the Uyghurs, he went on a rambling speech where he took both sides of the argument. I will show you that clip now, but first I have a short clip of a Fox report about the treatment of the Uyghurs inside of China. It includes some testimony from a woman who was detained there several years ago. And then after that, I will show the clip of Joe Biden, and I'll do some commentary at the end about what I think of his answer and maybe some of the implications.
A woman held for 9 months in a secret Chinese prison camp. Well, she is now giving a chilling first-hand account of the atrocities that she witnessed. Benjamin Hall has the story from London. Hi, Benjamin.
Yeah, hi, Dana. And we've all heard about these camps in China, but there is very little first-hand evidence from inside them. Yesterday, we heard that, and frankly, it is worse than imagined. Tursunay Ziawadan is 42 and now in the US. She was detained in camps twice in 2018. The first time was for a month, and mostly it was forced learning, singing about the greatness of China and President Xi. But the second time, everything was different. She was bussed in, though others arrived by train. Their hair was cut, she was stripped, and her jewelry was torn from her. What followed was 9 months of horror, of gang rape, violent beatings, and inhuman treatment.
Any woman under 40 was raped. Everyone in the camp experienced this, and of course, I did too. I was beaten, I was kicked and stamped on, once so much on my private parts that I was bleeding. I have had to have my ovaries removed.
There were around a dozen people held in each cell, and most nights someone was abused or in some cases disappeared. About 10,000 were in her camp, but over 1 million have been detained. There are reports of forced sterilization, and Tursunay describes being given random injections every 2 weeks that made her feel ill.
I have finally realized that there is no such thing as good Chinese. The torture, mental torture, and physical torture, they have no hearts.
The Chinese government insists this is counter-terrorism. It's de-radicalization. The US government a month ago called this genocide. Tursunay is speaking out now because she wants the world to come together and to call out this Chinese barbarity. Dana?
Our hearts go out to her, and she's a very brave woman. Thank you, Benjamin.
You just talked to China's president.
Yes, for 2 hours.
What about the Uyghurs? What about human rights abuses?
We must speak up for human rights. It's who we are. We can't. My comment to him was, and I know him well, and he knows me well. We're a 2-hour conversation.
You talked about this to him.
I talked about this too, and that's not so much refugee, but I talked about it. I said, look, you know, Chinese leaders, if you know anything about Chinese history, it has always been the time when China has been victimized by the outer world is when they haven't been unified at home. So the central, vastly overstated, the central principle of Xi Jinping is that there must be a united, tightly controlled China. And he uses his rationale for the things he does based on that. I point out to him, no American president can be sustained as a president if he doesn't reflect the values of the United States. And so the idea, I'm not going to speak out against what he's doing in Hong Kong, what he's doing with the Uyghurs in western mountains of China, and Taiwan trying to end the one China policy by making it forceful. I said, and by the he said he gets it. Culturally, there are different norms at each country, and their leaders are expected to follow. But my point was that when I came back from meeting with him and traveling 17,000 miles with him when I was vice president, he was the vice president. That's how I got to know him so well, at the request of President Hu, not a joke, his predecessor, President Hu, and President Obama wanted us to get to know one another because he was going to be the president. And I came back and said they're going to end their one-child policy because they're so xenophobic they won't let anybody else in, and more people are retired than working. How can they sustain economic growth when more people are retired?
When you talk to him, though, about human rights abuses, is that as far as it goes in terms of the U.S., or is there any actual repercussions for China?
Well, there will be repercussions for China, and he knows that. What I'm doing is making clear that we, in fact, are going to continue to reassert our role as spokespersons for human rights at the UN and other agencies that have an impact on their attitude. China is trying very hard to become the world leader. And to get that moniker and to be able to do that, they have to gain the confidence of other countries. And as long as they're engaged in activity that is contrary to basic human rights, it's going to be hard for them to do that. But it's much more complicated than that. I shouldn't have tried to talk China policy in 10 minutes on television.
Well, Biden's answer is very Trumpian in its content as far as what it reminds me of. Like I said before, he took both sides of the question for some reason. At first he said we should speak out against human rights violations, but then he went into a speech about how China has been victimized when it's not unified. I'm not sure how that directly relates to the question at hand. It seems like a bit of a capitulation, and then he went into talking about how different countries have different cultural norms, and in a way he seemed to be letting China off the hook for their treatment of the Uyghurs, but maybe in a charitable interpretation of what he was saying, he was just describing their motivations without necessarily condoning it. But more troubling so was towards the end when he was saying that he would not speak out against China in its various violations of human rights, whether it comes to Hong Kong, the Uyghurs, their one-child policy. And then he wrapped it up by saying that we should speak out for human rights. His answer is very scattered and unfocused, and you would think that a question like that would be easily answered. You could say it's what they're doing is evil, it's terrible, they should stop, and then at least for PR reasons, and then go back to your job and do nothing. And that would have been a better way to approach it than to capitulate how he did. And I don't know why he'd approach it this way. Maybe it was he was sort of surprised by the question and had a Freudian slip of sorts, where maybe he was admitting that while he doesn't approve of the way that China has been treating the Uyghurs and Hong Kong, China is in such a position of power that he is unwilling to criticize them directly or to take direct action against them. I mentioned earlier how I am alarmed by how China is treated by various organizations and businesses in the West, despite their actions. There's various video game companies, movie production companies, pretty much any industry that is highly international, and in the entertainment industry, a lot of the products get massaged and changed so that they can perform well in China. I think one of the biggest examples I've seen is the Star Wars movies. Finn, one of the main characters, is black, but in China, they're pretty much all racists, or at least they all look down on black people. And so when it was released in China, the movie poster, while in the West, Finn is heavily featured on the front of the posters for the movies. In China, he is removed, and or his face and body is vastly reduced on the posters. Various video game companies censor themselves as well in order to perform better in China. And as far as I could tell, China is also involved in many other industries where it flexes its muscle, and it's buying up shares in various numbers of companies. And so that's pretty scary that we could say politically and economically the West is capitulating to China just because they have a measure, or let's say a lot of economic power, and especially, I guess, their large population, which has been moving into the middle class recently, has a lot of disposable income to spend on these sorts of things. But overall, I just wanted to say that very disappointed in Biden. I didn't vote in this last election. I think Biden and Trump are both terrible politicians without any real moral backbone or philosophical understanding or guidance in the way that they operate. And in the wake of the last election, Biden positioned himself as the moral center, or he wants to be the moral center of the country. He wants to move us into a more egalitarian, unified, utopian version of America. But when it comes to confronting, or at least verbally reprimanding genocide in another country, he's unwilling to, and virtually because that country has a lot of economic power. While he was vice president, as far as I remember, he was all for invading the Middle East to make it a better place, to remove evil people from power and all that. But with China doing legitimate evil things as well, he gives them a pass. And that's highly disappointing for me. And I would just like as many people as possible to see this up front, to know that we did not bring on a new revolution of morality in the United States. We are likely in for more of the same, and that's unfortunate. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.